When I saw that rental agreement with my name on it, handed to me by my own son while his mother-in-law lived rent-free in the same house, I understood I was no longer a mother in their eyes, but they would soon learn a lesson. Never push a woman who raised you with her calloused hands to the very edge. The paper trembled in my fingers. $850 a month for the privilege of sleeping in the room where I once nursed him through fevers. Across the table, she sat there with that victorious smile, not knowing she'd just awakened something fierce in a woman who'd survived far worse than their petty cruelty. My name is Eleanor Matthews, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen enough of life's cruelties to be immune to shock, but that Tuesday evening in my son's dining room proved me wrong. The pot roast I'd prepared sat cooling on the table, its aroma mixing with the tension that had been building for weeks. Daniel, my only child, cleared his throat the way he used to when he was 12 and had broken something expensive. Sophie, his wife, busied herself rearranging the salt and pepper shakers while her mother, Patricia LeBlanc, sat across from me with perfectly manicured nails drumming against the mahogany. "Mom," Daniel began, sliding a manila envelope across the table toward me, "we need to discuss your living arrangements." My hands, weathered from 40 years of shuffling papers at Hamilton Mutual Insurance, reached for the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, professionally typed, with rental agreement printed in bold letters at the top. $850 per month, I read aloud, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest, due on the 1st of each month, beginning next month. Patricia's lips curved into what she probably thought was a subtle smile. She'd been living with us for 6 months now, ever since her husband left her for his dental hygienist. Not once had anyone mentioned rent to her. "It's only fair, Eleanor," Sophie chimed in, her voice artificially sweet. "We have expenses, and everyone needs to contribute." I looked at my son, searching for the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager I'd worked double shifts to put through college, the young man whose business debts I'd paid when his first startup crumbled. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Everyone?" I asked, my gaze shifting pointedly to Patricia, who was examining her French tips with sudden fascination. "Mother helps with the children," Sophie said quickly. "That's her contribution." The children, my grandchildren, whom I'd raised practically single-handedly for their first 5 years while Daniel and Sophie built their careers. The same children who now barely acknowledged my existence since Patricia's arrival. I folded the paper carefully, creasing it with the same precision I'd used to fold Daniel's tiny onesies 35 years ago. The dining room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with the weight of betrayal. "I see," I said, standing up slowly. My knees protested, too many years of bending to pick up toys, too many hours standing at the copy machine to make ends meet. "And when would you like me to sign this?" Daniel finally looked up, relief flooding his features. He'd expected a fight, tears, maybe pleading. He didn't know his mother had learned long ago that the best battles are won in silence. "By the end of the week would be fine," he said, already reaching for his phone, probably calculating how my rent would ease their financial burden. I picked up my plate, untouched pot roast congealing in its gravy, and walked to the kitchen. Through the pass-through window, I could hear Patricia's voice, suddenly animated now that the unpleasant business was done. "I told you she'd be reasonable," she said. "Eleanor's generation understands duty." Duty. I scraped my dinner into the garbage disposal, watching it disappear down the drain like 40 years of sacrifice. Yes, I understood duty. I understood it when I'd skipped meals so Daniel could have new school clothes. I understood it when I'd taken a second job at a diner, coming home at 2 a.m. with swollen feet and grease in my hair, just to pay for his SAT prep courses. But they were about to learn that understanding duty and accepting humiliation were two very different things. That night, I sat in the room my son now wanted to charge me for, surrounded by photos of better times. There was Daniel's college graduation, his wedding day, the birth of his children, in every picture. I stood slightly to the side, the devoted mother, the helpful grandmother, the woman who'd given everything and asked for nothing in return. I pulled out my old calculator, the one I'd used to balance impossible budgets for decades, $850 a month, $10,200 a year, for a room in a house where I'd invested not just money, but my entire life. The rental agreement lay on my nightstand, waiting for my signature. They thought they'd solved their problem, turned their burden into a revenue stream. They had no idea they'd just lit a fuse that had been laying dormant for 67 years. I picked up a pen, but instead of signing their paper, I began making a list of my own. It was time to stop being the woman who gave everything. It was time to become the woman who took it all back. The alarm clock's harsh buzz cut through the darkness at 4:30 a.m. My body protested as I swung my legs out of bed, joints stiff from yesterday's double shift. This had become my new routine: Hamilton Mutual from 8 to 5, then straight to Rosie's Diner for the dinner rush until midnight. I dressed quietly in the dark, careful not to wake anyone. God forbid I disturb Patricia's beauty sleep through the thin walls. I could hear her snoring in the guest suite, the one with the private bathroom and walk-in closet, while I made do with the hall bathroom shared with my grandchildren. Downstairs, I found evidence of last night's activities: empty wine bottles, cheese platters, and Patricia's friends' lipstick-stained glasses scattered across the living room. The same living room where I wasn't allowed to watch my evening news because it disturbed the ambiance during Patricia's book club meetings. I cleaned it all up, as I always did, then packed my lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple. The refrigerator was full of Patricia's organic vegetables and Sophie's meal prep containers, but my shelf, the bottom one, naturally, held only the basics I could afford after paying my rent. At Hamilton Mutual, I process claims with the efficiency of 4 decades' experience. My supervisor, barely older than Daniel, often commented on my reliability. "Eleanor, you're a rock," he'd say. If only he knew that rock was slowly being ground to dust. "Eleanor, honey, you look tired," said Marjorie from the next cubicle during our 10-minute break. "Just busy," I replied, not mentioning that my feet were already swelling in my sensible shoes, preparing for another 8 hours at the diner. The workday crawled by. At lunch, while my coworkers went out to the new salad place, I sat in the break room with my sandwich, calculating numbers on a napkin, after rent, utilities contribution, and my share of groceries. Somehow I owed for food I rarely got to eat. I had $300 left each month. From that came gas, insurance, medication for my blood pressure, and the occasional dollar I managed to save. 5 o'clock meant no rest. I drove straight to Rosie's, changing into my waitress uniform in the cramped employee bathroom. The pink polyester dress had seen better days, but Rosie didn't care about appearances as long as the coffee stayed hot and the orders came out right. "Table 6 wants extra pickles," Rosie barked from the kitchen. "And Eleanor, you're limping again. You need to see a doctor about that foot." I couldn't tell her that seeing a doctor meant choosing between the copay and eating for a week, so I smiled, grabbed the coffee pot, and worked through the pain. The dinner rush was brutal. Families with screaming children, truckers wanting quick service, teenagers who left quarters for tips. My feet screamed with each step, but I kept moving, kept smiling, kept pouring coffee until my wrist ached from the weight of the pot. During a brief lull, I stood by the window, watching the parking lot. A familiar Mercedes pulled up to the boutique across the street. Patricia emerged, shopping bags already in hand from earlier expeditions. She walked with the casual confidence of someone who'd never wondered if they could afford both breakfast and dinner. "Order up, Eleanor," Rosie's voice snapped me back to reality. By the time I drove home at 12:45 a.m., my entire body was a symphony of pain. The house was dark except for the soft glow from the family room. I peered in to find Patricia sprawled on the leather sectional I'd helped Daniel pick out, watching some reality show on the 70-inch TV I'd contributed to last Christmas. She looked up as I passed, her expression one of mild disgust. "You smell like grease," she said, wrinkling her nose. Sophie won't like that smell in the house. Maybe you should shower in the basement. The basement, where the water took 15 minutes to warm up and the shower head barely trickled. I bit my tongue, as I'd learned to do these past months, and headed upstairs. In my room, I carefully counted my tips. $37 in crumpled bills and change. I smoothed each dollar, stacking them neatly in an old shoebox hidden in my closet, my secret stash, growing painfully slowly. As I soaked my swollen feet in a basin of cold water, hot water would wake the house through the pipes. I noticed an invoice on my dresser. Sophie's handwriting. Mom, your share of this month's utilities, $127, due ASAP. I looked at the date. The same day Patricia had hosted 12 women for an all-day spa party in our backyard, running the pool heater and outdoor sound system for 9 hours straight. That night, I lay in bed doing math in my head. At this rate, it would take me 7 years to save enough for a security deposit on even a modest apartment. 7 years of double shifts, swollen feet, and peanut butter sandwiches, while Patricia lived like royalty on my sacrifice. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see past their own greed, was that every insult, every indignity, every dollar they squeezed from my exhausted hands was forging something harder than their casual cruelty could imagine. Eleanor Matthews, the pushover, the reliable mother, the silent sufferer, was slowly transforming into something else entirely. And when the metamorphosis was complete, they would learn that the meek didn't inherit the earth. They took it back. The coffee shop on Maple Street wasn't somewhere I usually splurged, but my old friend Victor Lawson had insisted on treating me. We'd worked together at Hamilton Mutual 20 years ago before he'd moved into financial consulting. His email had come out of the blue. Eleanor, we need to catch up. My treat. You look exhausted, Victor said bluntly after we'd exchanged pleasantries. He'd aged well, silver-haired and sharp-eyed behind designer glasses. Just keeping busy. I deflected, wrapping my hands around the ceramic mug to ease the arthritis from last night's shift at Rosie's. Victor studied me with the same intensity he'd once reserved for complicated claims. Eleanor, I've been in this business too long not to recognize the signs. What's really going on? Maybe it was the kindness in his voice or the accumulated exhaustion, but I found myself telling him everything. The rent, Patricia's free ride, the double shifts, the basement shower suggestion. His expression darkened with each detail. Have you seen your son's mortgage statements lately? He asked when I finished. Why would I? That's none of my business. Victor pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I play golf with Jim Hendricks from First National. Daniel and Sophie refinanced 6 months ago. They're underwater. Eleanor, that house is worth less than they owe, and they're 3 months behind on payments. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter, but they just bought Sophie a new Range Rover. Leased, Victor corrected. Along with Patricia's BMW, they're juggling credit cards to make minimum payments. You're $850 a month? That's probably the only thing keeping the foreclosure notices at bay. I stared at him, pieces clicking into place. Sophie's sudden interest in coupons, Daniel's nervous tics whenever mail arrived, the way they'd stopped talking about their upcoming anniversary trip to Europe. So I'm not a burden, I said slowly. I'm a life preserver. More than that, Victor leaned forward. If they lose that house, they lose everything, their credit's shot. Eleanor, without your rent and financial contributions, they'd be looking at bankruptcy within 6 months. And Patricia? He snorted. Patricia LeBlanc declared bankruptcy 2 years ago. Her ex-husband's dental hygienist wasn't the only reason for the divorce. She'd been hiding shopping addiction debt for years. She's got nothing but her daughter's charity and whatever she can squeeze from me. I finished. We sat in silence while I absorbed this information. All those times they'd made me feel worthless, like a charity case they were tolerating, when in reality, I was the only stable thing in their house of cards. Eleanor, Victor said carefully, what's your endgame here? I thought about the shoebox of carefully saved tips, the aching feet, the dismissive looks. I don't know yet. Well, when you figure it out, Call me." He slid a business card across the table. "I know some people who might be helpful. Real estate attorneys, financial advisors who specialize in, let's call them, delicate family situations." That evening, I came home to find my bank statement opened on my bed. The envelope had clearly been steamed open and hastily resealed. My October statement, showing the direct deposit from Hamilton Mutual and the carefully maintained checking balance. Fury, white-hot and cleansing, flooded through me. I'd suspected they were monitoring my mail, but this was proof. They were tracking my finances like wolves circling a wounded deer. I found them in the kitchen, Patricia included, huddled around what looked like a stack of bills. "Mother," Daniel said, jumping slightly, "you're home early." "My shift ended at 11, I said evenly, placing my violated bank statement on the counter. "Interesting reading material you left on my bed." Sophie had the grace to blush, but Patricia just smiled. "Family should be transparent about finances. Eleanor, we were concerned you might be struggling." "How thoughtful," I replied, my voice dripping honey over steel. "Speaking of transparency, how's the mortgage payment coming along?" The silence was deafening. Daniel's face went pale. Sophie's hand flew to her throat, and Patricia's smile finally faltered. "That's none of your," Daniel started. "Business?" I finished. "Like my bank statement was none of yours?" I looked at each of them in turn. "I know about the refinancing, the missed payments, the maxed out credit cards. I know it all." Patricia recovered first, her voice shrill. "You've been snooping." "No," I said calmly. "I've been paying attention. There's a difference." I turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Oh, and Daniel, that check I write you every month for rent, you might want to cash it quickly. Banks tend to freeze accounts when foreclosure proceedings start." As I climbed the stairs to my overpriced room, I heard their panicked voices rising behind me. They'd shown their hand by stealing my privacy, and in doing so, they'd revealed their desperation. Victor was right. I needed an endgame. But first, I needed to document everything. Every cent paid, every extra charge, every financial manipulation. Because when you're planning to burn down a house of cards, you better make sure you're not standing inside it when the match is lit. That night, I started a new notebook. Not calculations of my poverty, but a detailed record of their fraud. The student had finally figured out the lesson. In a family that worshipped money, the one who controlled the cash controlled everything. And they just taught me exactly how to play their game. The law offices of Bishop and Associates occupied a modest brick building on the quiet end of Commerce Street. Elaine Bishop herself answered the door, a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been recommended by Victor as someone who understood both real estate law and the art of discretion. "Mrs. Matthews," she said, leading me to a conference room that smelled of leather and old books. "Victor filled me in on the basics. Tell me what you're thinking." I'd rehearsed this moment during countless late-night shifts, but speaking it aloud made it real. "I want to buy my son's house without him knowing I'm the buyer." Elaine didn't blink. "Through a shell company, I assume. It's perfectly legal, if done correctly. May I ask why?" "Because they've turned me into their personal ATM while treating me like a burden. Because they monitor my bank statements and charge me rent while my son's mother-in-law lives free. Because..." I paused, finding the right words. "Because I spent 40 years sacrificing everything for a son who now sees me as nothing but a revenue stream." She nodded slowly. "Revenge served cold and legally, my favorite kind. Let's talk specifics." Over the next hour, Elaine outlined the plan. We would create an LLC called Harborstone Holdings, registered in Delaware for privacy. I would be the sole member, but my name would appear nowhere in public records. The company would make a cash offer on Daniel's house when, not if, it went into foreclosure. Based on what Victor told me about their financial situation, you're looking at 4 to 6 months before the bank takes action, Elaine explained. "That gives us time to prepare. How much can you put together?" I thought of my pathetic shoebox savings. Not enough, not nearly enough. There are options, she said carefully. Your retirement account from Hamilton Mutual. You could take a loan against it or even cash out early with penalties. There's also your mother's house. My mother's house. The tiny 2-bedroom in Riverside that I'd inherited 3 years ago and rented out for extra income. Income that went straight to Daniel to help with his temporary cash flow problems. What's it worth? I asked. Elaine pulled up property records on her laptop. Current market value is around $180,000, no mortgage. Correct? Free and clear, just like I'd kept it for Daniel's inheritance. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sell it, Elaine advised. In this market, you could close in 60 days. Combined with your retirement funds, you'd have enough to make a competitive cash offer when the time comes. And then, a smile played at the corners of her mouth. Then you become their landlord. Harborstone Holdings offers to let them stay as tenants, at market rate, of course, which in that neighborhood would be about $3,000 a month. $3,000, nearly 4 times what they charge me for a single room. I'll need to move my money somewhere they can't track, I said, thinking of the violated bank statement. I recommend Cornerstone Credit Union in Millbrook, 20 miles away. Excellent privacy policies, and they don't share information with the major banks. Open the account under the LLC once we've established it. We spent another hour discussing details. Elaine would file the LLC paperwork immediately. I would start liquidating assets quietly, transferring money in small amounts to avoid attention. She gave me the name of a realtor who specialized in quick, discreet sales. One more thing, Elaine said as I prepared to leave. Start moving your personal belongings out now. Small items they won't notice. Important documents, jewelry, anything sentimental. Store them elsewhere. Why? Because when this goes down, things will happen fast. You don't want to be scrambling to save your mother's china when you're making your exit. That evening, I rented a small storage unit across town, paying 6 months in advance with cash. Then I began the slow process of erasure. A few books here, some winter clothes there, the photo albums from my closet shelf, my mother's silver, wrapped in felt and hidden in a tote bag. Daniel and Sophie were too preoccupied with their financial juggling to notice. Patricia was too self-absorbed to care that the hallway photos were gradually disappearing, replaced by generic prints from the dollar store. 2 weeks later, I sat in a different credit union in Millbrook, opening an account for Harborstone Holdings with Elaine beside me as the registered agent. The teller didn't bat an eye as I deposited the first cashier's check from my retirement account loan. Congratulations, Mrs. Matthews, Elaine said quietly as we left. You're officially a real estate investor. That night, I served dinner as usual, listening to Patricia complain about the inferior brand of wine Sophie had bought. Daniel pushed food around his plate, the weight of unpaid bills visible in the slump of his shoulders. Sophie chattered nervously about a neighbor's vacation, trying to fill the silence with meaningless noise. They had no idea that their personal ATM had just incorporated. Eleanor, Patricia said suddenly, you're being very quiet tonight. It's rather rude when we're trying to have a conversation. I looked up from my plate, meeting her eyes with a serenity I hadn't felt in years. I apologize. Patricia, I was just thinking about investments, the importance of knowing when to cut your losses and when to double down. She sniffed, returning to her free wine and subsidized lifestyle, oblivious to the meaning behind my words. In my room, I crossed another day off my calendar. 4 months. Elaine had estimated 4 months until their house of cards collapsed and Harborstone Holdings would be there to catch it. For a penny on the dollar and all the justice money could buy, Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching the act I was about to perform. I'd called in sick to Hamilton Mutual for the first time in 5 years, spending the previous night packing the last of my belongings. Everything I valued now sat in a storage unit across town, leaving my room carefully staged with just enough to avoid suspicion. At 8:15 a.m., I heard car doors slam, Daniel leaving for work, Sophie taking the kids to school, Patricia heading to her weekly salon appointment. The house fell silent. I moved methodically, double-checking each drawer, each closet corner. My entire life in this house reduced to 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. The room looked barely lived in now. Just some clothes in the closet, basic toiletries, furniture that had come with the house anyway. From my purse, I pulled out the rental agreement Daniel had given me months ago, still unsigned. I placed it on the dresser, weighing it down with my house key. Beside it, I left a single sheet of paper with 7 words. I will no longer be contributing financially. No explanation, no forwarding address. Let them taste the confusion I'd felt when they'd handed me that rental agreement. I loaded my car quietly, muscle memory from all those years of trying not to wake baby Daniel helping me navigate the creaky stairs. The rain had picked up, masking any sounds as I made 3 trips. By 9:30 a.m., I was driving away from the house where I'd spent the last 6 years, pouring money and love into an increasingly empty vessel. In my rearview mirror, the Colonial looked smug and secure, no hint of the financial termites eating at its foundation. Elaine had arranged everything at the furnished efficiency in Millbrook. Month-to-month lease under Harborstone Holdings, utilities included. Walking distance to both the credit union and a small grocery store. It was clean, quiet, and completely mine. I spent the day setting up my new life. A basic flip phone replaced my smartphone. No family tracking plan to worry about. A post office box for mail. Even a new email address that didn't include my married name or birth year. At 4:47 p.m., my old phone exploded with calls before I powered it off for good. I could imagine the scene. Daniel coming home to find my note, the panic spreading like wildfire. Sophie frantically checking my empty room. Patricia realizing her meal ticket had vanished. But it was Tuesday, which meant I had a shift at Rosie's. I arrived early, changing into my uniform with a lightness I hadn't felt in months. Even the polyester didn't itch as much. "Eleanor, you're glowing," Rosie commented during a lull. "You win the lottery or something?" "Something like that," I smiled, refilling the coffee maker. Wednesday brought the storm I'd expected. Through Elaine. I learned they'd tried to file a missing person report, only to be told that an adult leaving a note and taking their belongings wasn't considered missing. They'd called Hamilton Mutual, but HR wouldn't release any information. They'd even driven to Rosie's. But I'd been warned and spent that shift in the kitchen. By Friday, desperation had set in. Elaine forwarded me a voicemail from Daniel, his voice cracking. "Mom, please, the mortgage payment is due. Sophie's credit card got declined at the grocery store. We need to talk. Not about missing me, not about worrying if I was safe, just about money." I met Elaine at her office that afternoon to review the Harborstone Holdings bank statements. My mother's house had sold quickly to a young couple thrilled to get a starter home. Combined with my retirement funds and savings, I had enough. "The foreclosure notice will be filed within 30 days, Elaine reported, monitoring the courthouse records. "First National Bank doesn't mess around. Once that happens, we'll be ready." "What about Patricia there?" I asked. "She's not on the mortgage." Elaine's smile was sharp. "No, but she's been accepting mail there, parking her car there, receiving packages. Legally, she's a tenant. When the house changes hands, she'll have the same rights as any other tenant, which is to say, very few if the new owner wants her out." That weekend, I worked both my jobs with renewed energy. Every dollar earned was a dollar toward my future, not theirs. My feet still hurt, my back still ached, but the pain felt different now. It felt like purpose. 2 weeks into my disappearance, Victor called my flip phone. "They're getting desperate," he reported. "Daniel's been asking around about private loans, shark rates. Sophie's trying to sell her jewelry, but it's worth less than they paid." "And Patricia?" "Yes?" "Patricia's been on dating sites looking for her next meal ticket. Profile says she's a temporarily displaced socialite seeking a generous gentleman. Photos are from 10 years ago." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing in my tiny but peaceful apartment. They were turning on each other, just as I'd known they would. When the money ran out, So did the illusion of family harmony. That night, I sat by my window watching the rain, a cup of tea warming my hands. Somewhere across town, my son was learning what I'd always known. You can't pay bills with contempt, and you can't deposit disrespect. The foreclosure notice would come soon, and when it did, Harborstone Holdings would be ready with a cash offer they couldn't refuse. The meek hadn't inherited the earth, but with the right LLC and a good lawyer, they could certainly buy it back. The knock on my apartment door came at 7:20 p.m. on a Thursday. I'd been expecting it. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel, thinner, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled shirt that Sophie would never have let him leave the house in before. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Mom," he breathed, relief and desperation warring on his face. "Thank God, I've been looking everywhere." "You found me," I said simply. He shifted awkwardly in the hallway. "Can I come in? We need to talk." "We can talk here." His face flushed. "Mom, please. I know you're angry about the rent thing, but—" "The rent thing?" I interrupted. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Look, we're in trouble. Real trouble. The bank sent a foreclosure notice. Sophie's had a nervous breakdown. The kids are asking where Grandma went, and Patricia is still living rent-free, I assume." He had the decency to look ashamed. "Mom, we need your help, just until we get back on our feet. Your rent money, it was keeping us afloat, and without it—" I studied my son, this stranger wearing Daniel's face. When had he become someone who saw his mother as a financial instrument first and a person second? "I'm not giving you money, Daniel." "Then co-sign a loan, or let us use your credit. Anything." His voice cracked. "They're going to take our house." "No," I said quietly. "They're going to take your house. The one where you charged me rent while Patricia lived like a queen. The one where I was told to shower in the basement so I wouldn't offend anyone with the smell of honest work." "I never said that." "No, you just let it happen, which is worse. Really, at least Patricia was honest about her contempt." Daniel's shoulders sagged. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. Sophie's sorry. We're all sorry. Now will you help us?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Do you know why I left, Daniel?" "Because you were angry about the money. Because you opened my bank statements. Because you monitored my finances while hiding your own bankruptcy. Because you turned me into a tenant in what was supposed to be my home while letting your mother-in-law live like royalty. Because somewhere along the way, you forgot that I'm your mother, not your personal bailout fund." Tears gathered in his eyes. "Mom, please, we'll lose everything." "You already did," I said gently. "You lost it the day you handed me that rental agreement." I started to close the door, but his hand shot out to stop it. "Wait, at least tell me where you're getting money to live. This place, your car. You can't afford this on your salary." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd given him in months. "Actually, It's amazing how much money you have when you're not subsidizing 3 other adults' lifestyles. But goodbye, Daniel. Don't come here again." This time, when I closed the door, he didn't try to stop me. I heard him standing in the hallway for several minutes before his footsteps finally retreated. The next morning, Elaine called with news. "The house goes to auction in 3 weeks. First National set the opening bid at $300,000. In this market, with the condition it's in, I doubt they'll get other serious offers." "And Harborstone Holdings?" "Ready to bid $325 cash, more than enough to secure it, not enough to raise suspicions." I sat in my small kitchen, morning light streaming through clean windows. No Patricia to criticize my coffee choice. No Sophie to passive-aggressively rearrange things. No Daniel to look through me like I was invisible until bills came due. "Do it," I said. 3 weeks crawled by. I worked my shifts, saved my money, and ignored the increasingly frantic calls to my old phone number. Victor kept me updated through Elaine. Daniel had tried everything. Loan sharks who wanted 50% interest, a reverse mortgage that fell through, even a GoFundMe that raised exactly $43. On auction day, I sat in Rosie's break room, watching the clock, at 2 p.m. Elaine texted, Congratulations! Harborstone Holdings is now the proud owner of 42 Maple Grove Lane. I stared at the message, waiting to feel something. Triumph? Vindication? Instead, I felt only a quiet satisfaction, like finally balancing a ledger that had been off for years. That evening, I drove past the house. My house now. Technically, the lights were on, shadows moving behind curtains. They had no idea their new landlord was the woman they'd driven away with their greed. But they would. Soon enough, they would. Elaine had already prepared the notice. Harborstone Holdings would be reaching out to discuss their options as tenants. Market rate rent, proper lease agreements, first month, last month, and security deposit due immediately. No family discount, no special treatment, just business. Yeah, the same kind of business they'd taught me. The conference room at Bishop & Associates felt different this time. I wasn't the desperate woman seeking help, but a property owner about to reclaim more than just real estate. Elaine had arranged everything perfectly. Daniel, Sophie, and Patricia sat across from us, their faces cycling through confusion, disbelief, and growing horror as she explained the situation. As I've stated, Elaine said calmly, sliding documents across the table, Harborstone Holdings acquired the property at public auction. You are currently occupying the premises without a valid lease agreement. This is insane, Sophie sputtered. We live there. It's our home. Correction, Elaine replied. You are residing in a property owned by my client, which makes you either tenants or trespassers, depending on how we proceed. Patricia had been uncharacteristically quiet, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Who owns this? Harborstone Holdings? Elaine smiled pleasantly. That information is protected by corporate privacy laws. What matters is the offer being made to you today. I sat silently beside her, wearing a new suit I'd bought specifically for this moment. Not expensive, but well-fitted and professional. The kind of outfit that said I belonged in this room, making these decisions. Daniel kept staring at me, trying to catch my eye. I focused on the contracts in front of me, reviewing terms I already knew by heart. The monthly rent, Elaine continued, will be $3,200, first month, last month, and security deposit due upon signing. That's $9,600 to move in. That's highway robbery, Patricia shrieked, finding her voice. No one charges that much for rent. Actually, Elaine pulled out market comparisons. That's below market rate for a 4-bedroom colonial in Maple Grove. We're being generous. I watched Daniel's jaw clench the way it did when he was doing math in his head. Math that wouldn't add up no matter how many times he calculated. And if we refuse, he asked quietly, then you'll need to vacate within 30 days. Standard eviction proceedings will begin Monday if we don't have signed agreements and payment. Sophie started crying, not the pretty tears she deployed for sympathy, but raw, ugly sobs of someone watching their life crumble. This is cruel. Whoever owns this company is a monster. I finally spoke, my voice steady and clear. Cruel? Like charging your mother rent while your own mother lives free? Like monitoring her bank accounts? Like suggesting she shower in the basement because she smells like honest work? The room went silent except for Sophie's hiccuping breaths. Mom? Daniel whispered. I nodded once. Harborstone Holdings is mine. Every share, every decision, every legal right to the property you're sitting in. Patricia shot to her feet. This is illegal, elder abuse, we'll sue. On what grounds? Elaine asked mildly. Mrs. Matthews made a legal purchase at a public auction. She's offering you the opportunity to rent at fair market value. More than fair, considering she could simply evict you. You planned this, Daniel said, his voice hollow. The whole time. You were planning this. No, I corrected. I was planning to spend my retirement years enjoying my grandchildren and helping my family. You changed that plan when you decided I was a revenue stream instead of a mother. So this is revenge? Sophie had stopped crying, anger replacing tears. This is business, I said, echoing words they'd used on me. You taught me that family and business are separate. I'm simply applying the lesson. Patricia grabbed her purse. I'm not staying here for this farce. Sophie, Daniel, we're leaving. Where will you go? I asked conversationally. Your credit is ruined. You have no savings. No one will rent to you without significant deposits. And Patricia, your dating profile hasn't yielded any generous gentleman willing to take in a 60-year-old woman with expensive tastes and no income. She froze, her face flushing. You've been spying on me? No more than you spied on my bank statements. Turnabout, as they say, is fair play. Elaine pushed the contracts forward again. You have 72 hours to decide, sign and pay, or start packing. Those are your options. Daniel looked at me one last time, searching for the mother who'd always saved him. How can you do this to your own son? I stood, gathering my purse with the same dignity I'd maintained while serving coffee to truckers at 2 a.m. The same way you did it to your own mother, efficiently, legally, and without a single thought for the person on the other side of the transaction. Mom, please. That's Mrs. Matthews, I interrupted, or landlord, if you prefer. We're business associates now. Nothing more. You made that choice. Daniel, I'm simply honoring it. I walked to the door, pausing to look back at them one last time. My son, defeated, his wife, disheveled, her mother, deflated, the trinity of greed that had pushed me to this point. Elaine will handle any further communication. And Daniel? That rent is gross, not net. Utilities are separate. Water, gas, electric, trash, all in your name. Welcome to the real world of renting. The last thing I heard before the door closed was Patricia's shrill voice. I am not paying rent to that woman. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a moment, hands trembling slightly on the wheel, not from regret or sadness, but from the sheer relief of finally standing up for myself. Elaine appeared at my window. You did well in there. Did I asked. I just evicted my own son. No, she corrected. You gave your son the same opportunity he gave you, a chance to pay fair market value for housing. The only difference is you're not charging him extra for the privilege of being family. I laughed, surprising myself. She was right. Even now, I was being kinder than they had been. My phone buzzed, a text from Victor. Heard the meeting went well. Dinner to celebrate, my treat. For the first time in years, I had something worth celebrating. And for the first time in months, I could afford to accept. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, warming my face as I sipped coffee from a delicate china cup. No more chipped mugs or bitter break-room coffee. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, waves creating a rhythm that matched my peaceful breathing. 6 months had passed since that meeting at Bishop and Associates. 6 months since I'd reclaimed not just property, but my dignity. The villa had been Elaine's suggestion. You've spent decades living for others, she'd said. Maybe it's time to live for yourself. The previous owner, going through a divorce, needed a quick cash sale. Harborstone Holdings had obliged. I'd moved in on a Tuesday, the same day of the week I'd once been handed that rental agreement. The irony wasn't lost on me as I'd walked through rooms filled with light and possibility instead of resentment and obligation. My easel stood in the corner of the sunroom, waiting. I'd bought it yesterday, along with oils, brushes, and canvases. 40 years since I'd last held a paintbrush. Trading art for practicality when Daniel was born, my fingers itched to create again. The doorbell chimed. Unusual for this peaceful neighborhood, through the security camera Elaine had insisted on. I saw Daniel standing at my door, alone, older looking than his 35 years. I almost didn't answer, then curiosity won. Hello, Daniel. He stared at the villa, at my appearance, rested, healthy, wearing a simple linen dress instead of polyester uniforms. Mom, this place. Would you like some coffee? I offered, surprising myself. We sat on the terrace, the ocean providing a buffer for our awkwardness. He looked exhausted, wearing the same expression I'd carried for years. We moved, he said finally, Sophie and I. We're renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside. Patricia?" He laughed bitterly. "Patricia found her generous gentleman, married him last month, moved to Arizona." I sipped my coffee, waiting. "Sophie's working now. Retail. I picked up a second job." He met my eyes. "I understand now. The exhaustion, the constant math in your head, the feeling that you're drowning while everyone else is swimming." "It's a hard lesson," I acknowledged. "The kids miss you." That struck deep, but I held steady. "They're welcome to visit. You and Sophie can drop them off." His face crumpled slightly. "I miss you too. Mom, not your money or what you could do for us. Just you, the mother who made blanket forts and told stories and never missed a school play." That mother got lost somewhere between rental agreements and basement shower suggestions. I said gently, "I'm still finding her again." We sat in silence, watching sailboats drift across the horizon. Finally, he stood to leave. "Mom?" He paused at the door. "That company name? Harborstone. Was that—" "Your grandfather's boat," I confirmed. "The one he taught us both to sail on before life got complicated." He nodded, understanding more than I'd said. Maybe when you find her again, that mother, she could teach my kids to sail." After he left, I returned to my easel. The blank canvas didn't intimidate me anymore. I picked up a brush, feeling its familiar weight, and began mixing colors. Blue for the ocean, gold for the sun, gray for the storms weathered and survived. The painting wouldn't be perfect. My hands were older, less steady, but it would be mine, created in a space I'd earned, with time I'd reclaimed. I thought about Daniel's visit. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something new, not the relationship where I gave everything and received nothing, but something balanced, real. Or maybe we wouldn't. Either way, I was at peace. My phone buzzed. Elaine, checking in as she did weekly, then Victor confirming dinner plans. New friendships built on respect rather than need. As afternoon faded to evening, I set down my brushes and walked to the water's edge. The waves lapped at my feet, warm and welcoming. I'd spent so many years drowning in other people's demands that I'd forgotten how to float. But here's what they don't tell you about revenge. It's not the end game. It's not even the point. The point is, the moment you stop accepting less than you deserve, the moment you stop apologizing for taking up space, the moment you remember that being someone's mother, wife, or mother-in-law doesn't erase your right to be treated with basic human dignity. I'd bought this villa with cash earned from decades of sacrifice, but what I'd really purchased was freedom. Freedom from guilt, freedom from manipulation, freedom to paint badly, sleep late, or eat ice cream for breakfast without anyone's judgment. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, I raised my coffee cup in a toast to Eleanor Matthews, the woman who'd learned too late, but not too late, that family shouldn't come with a price tag, and love shouldn't require a rental agreement. Tomorrow, I'd paint again. Maybe I'd call my grandchildren, invite them for a weekend. Maybe I'd take that art class at the community center, or join the book club Elaine mentioned. Or maybe I'd just sit here, watching the ocean, reveling in the sound of my own breathing in a space where no one could charge me for the privilege of existing. I'd earned that right. I'd bought it back, one dignity at a time. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect with others who understand that family should be about love, not ledgers. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about standing up for yourself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting free.